Hey guys, it's CC here. Just wanted to provide you with my take on a number of things that are happening in the market more broadly, specifically looking at some of the broader geopolitical things that are occurring that may be of interest, and certainly I think my perspective on that. I also wanted to provide you with a bit of an update on PulseChain, what's been going on with respect to the community, some of the initiatives that have been developed and are developing. Some pretty exciting things occurring there. And finally, I think I just wanted to provide a bit of a teaser, a bit of an announcement in terms of what we're doing to help grow and support PulseChain. So the two key things for me on a geopolitical framework would be obviously the what's occurred today actually with respect to Donald Trump. Having the convictions against him now. Really, my view is I'm not a supporter of Trump or Biden, to be honest. I think it's all just a show. A lot of what's going on at the moment is all about division and creating division amongst the US, which personally I'm saddened by what I tend to see here. And it's, I think a lot of people are very aware of this now and starting to become more aware of some of the division that's been created. The one good thing to come of the recent announcements by the Trump campaign was their views on Bitcoin, their views on cryptocurrencies in general, and also the announcement around CBDCs or not wanting to have a CBDC.
I will ensure that the future of crypto and the future of Bitcoin will be made in the USA, not driven overseas. I will support the right to self-custody. To the nation's 50 million crypto holders, I say this with your vote. I will keep Elizabeth Warren and her goons away from your Bitcoin. And I will never allow the creation of a central bank digital currency.
Now, what do I really think? I think the CBDCs are coming regardless. I think they'll be dressed up as something else. The one positive, though, is that there's something that at least the Trump campaign is suggesting is that they'll move away from that narrative. Time will tell. I'm a bit of a skeptic, so I'm not sure that that's necessarily going to play out the way that we would all hope. We'll just have to wait and see how that develops. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was obviously the announcements recently around the ETFs. Very positive steps. I still feel that there's still steps to occur before some of these ETFs will be able to trade. My understanding, at least, is that there needs to be a process for anyone wanting to issue an ETF to go through a process to enable them to trade. That could take a little while before that starts to happen. What do I really think about all of this? I think, look, there's a collective group of people that would prefer to trade through that mechanism. I know that we certainly align with the ethos of self-custody, decentralization, freedom of speech. They're all the things that we align with. And certainly from our perspective, we would prefer people to invest in that way. But the reality is that there's a significant audience that prefers to do that in a more controlled manner. And we shouldn't be excluding that audience in the future. So what do I really think? I think whilst it also suggests there could be more bigger players coming in, the potential for a little bit more centralization, the reality is it's a good thing. It will grow crypto in general, despite the fact that, we may have some misgivings around the lack of decentralization, the lack of self-custody, which are ethoses that we would prefer to have. I just feel that we need to address growth and be more inclusive of that type of mechanism for investment. And so for me, it's a good thing. And I suspect that in future, we may start to see more of that. And hopefully PulseChain becomes an included asset in an ETF in the future. Well, time will tell. But certainly if Ethereum has been assessed as that, and it's certainly no longer perceived as a security, but more of a commodity, that also bodes well for PulseChain. So our view is, whilst we don't always necessarily individually subscribe to lack of self-custody, I think it's a good thing that these things happen, and it just introduces others into crypto, which is, I feel, will be a very good thing in the future. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was some of the things that have been going on in PulseChain. I think I wanted to shout out again to Matty Allen for all his efforts with the conference. I think it's an enormous amount of work that he puts in, and it's not always acknowledged. And I think You know, I know whilst we produce content, the effort that Maddie goes to actually bring people together is enormous. And hats off to Maddie. And Maddie, thank you so much for doing all of that. I think personally, I found a lot of the content from the conference to be quite useful. And I think for me, that's an important part of the growth of the community, is to continue to outreach to people and provide content of that nature to help people understand, but more importantly, to help with the outreach to people outside the community. So well done, Maddie. Again, thank you very much. And we were really proud to be a supporter of that as well. The other thing that I wanted to flag is that we've been working in the background with some other team members, whilst we've not really done a hell of a lot other than provide some financial support, is actually getting a MEXC listing up and running. But the guys that have been doing all the work behind the scenes, again, thank you so much for all your efforts. I think having an exchange listing is really important for PulseChain. And whilst, you know, there's a lot of work that has to go into that, we're happy to see that happen. And it hopefully becomes a catalyst for more of these type of listings in the future. Right? So it's a good thing to start, and we'll see a lot more in that space. And again, we're very happy to support that. The other thing I did want to talk about is I believe Matty Allen and Matt from Crypto Coffee is actually heading to Consensus. Those guys are fantastic. They're great spokespeople for PulseChain, and I know they'll do a fantastic job whilst they're there. So we wish them well. Again, that's trying to get an outreach. Whilst Consensus is largely about crypto, it's still reaching audiences that may not be aware of PulseChain. And those two guys are fantastic ambassadors for the chain, and we wish them well at Consensus. Lastly, in terms of what's been going on in PulseChain, you've probably seen, and hopefully you've seen, some of Ben Armstrong's content in the Zone 5 sort of podcast that he's produced. We were happy to become a sponsor of that. Obviously, a number of influencers in the community have been interviewed by Ben. Personally, I think it's really good that we're doing that, and hats off to Ben for helping us through that process. We were very happy to be sponsors. It's also interesting to me, at least, that because I have an interest in geopolitics, just to see Ben speaking about more traditional finance issues, and particularly discussing his perspective on geopolitics. And I'm just enjoying his take on some of that. Some of it can become a little bit dark, but I personally, it's good to know a little bit about that and then draw your own conclusions as to how things tend to play out. Now, I do want to digress a little bit. I just wanted to suggest to the community more at large, and that is that just to reflect on, well, why are we here? Why are we really here? And I think by and large, I'd have to say that most people are here because we want to make money. And it's also that we're very aligned with the ethos of decentralization, self-custody, freedom of speech. They're the sort of things that we're very keen on. And obviously, at an individual level, that's why I'm in this space, is because I do believe in that ethos of, hey, you are the best person to custody your own assets. And self-custody is really important. And decentralization and the lack of control or controlling influences is something that I personally really prefer. Now, reality has to step in a little bit, right? So we actually have to then reflect and say, well, hang on a second. Whilst that's true, and we do aspire to that, for us to have a larger audience, there is a significant group in the more traditional finance sector that don't want to do that. They don't want to have direct control of their assets. And the reason for that is they're busy with their lives and they're doing other things. And whilst they're a significant portion or a wealthy portion of the population, they're quite happy to have somebody else manage their affairs. And, you know, in traditional finance, there's quite a lot of regulatory frameworks to help ensure that that's done in a professional way and in a way that doesn't actually damage those individuals. It's inevitable that occasionally those things don't play out the way that individuals would expect, and certain people then get damaged by that. Our view is, look, we need to reach that audience as well, right? So we can't be thinking that, hey, look, just because we align with the ethos of why PulseChain was developed, to bring in more people into the chain, one way of doing that is to actually reach out to some of the typical fund managers, private equity guys, hedge fund managers. That's the type of audience that we need to be reaching, because they collectively assist people to invest in a number of different mediums. And I kind of feel that PulseChain is a very good way for them to start thinking about, okay, well, where else might we invest? And whilst a lot of people that aren't necessarily into crypto, the default position is say, let's go buy Bitcoin and sit on it and wait. And whilst I think that's okay, that's a position you could take, there's so many other opportunities available, particularly and that are a hell of a lot less risky. And the one example that I would cite would be, and this is, a little bit of self-interest in terms of liquid loans, is that there's nothing wrong with having a stable coin like USDL and parking that into the stability pool. You're going to get a really good return. And that return is something that, because it's backed, because you actually are investing in the stable coin and putting it into the staking pool, the risks associated with the actual underlying asset, which is USDL, that you're putting into the stability pool, there's less volatility, but you're still getting reasonable returns. And when I say reasonable returns, I think the 7-day average is something like around the 20-25% mark, which that's a hell of a lot better than what you would be getting with US Treasuries, for example. Sure, there's a little bit more risk involved here, but the reality is that that's the sort of thing that hedge fund managers and private equity guys can then assess. And they can do all the risk assessments around that, but it's not a bad option for people wanting to start out into crypto without necessarily just investing directly into Bitcoin, even if it's through an ETF, because we all know that whilst Bitcoin, is certainly progressing upwards, it is a volatile asset. It can drop 80 to 90%. That has happened in the past, and no doubt there will be some drops in the future. Maybe the volatility won't be as great, but whilst that's the downside risk is lessened, the upside return is also reduced, right? So the returns aren't going to be anywhere near what they were at the beginning as they are now. And now I could be proven wrong, but you only have to look at what's been happening with Bitcoin over the last few years. It certainly does take a dip every now and then, and sure, it recovers. But the reality is you're not going to have the 10x, 20x that you might see on other projects. And I think that's where I believe PulseChain can excel. But having said that, the point that I'm trying to make here is there is an opportunity of reaching that audience, and we can do that through the likes of hedge fund managers, private equity teams that may actually want to allocate a portion of funds to less risky plays, such as placing USDL in the stability pool. And it kind of leads me to something else around that issue, that people automatically have presumed that you need to take a loan if you're using liquid loans, and that couldn't be further from the truth. One of the things that you could be doing is just parking some USDL. So acquire some USDL on market, place it into the stability pool, and start earning some of this yield. You do not need to take a loan to use liquid loans. And I'd hazard to say that that's the same for some of the other protocols of that type. So I know the Earn protocol would be very similar to that. And I also believe that the one that's been generated for Hex is very, very similar in that guise as well. So if you have a stable coin, you can actually earn a reasonable return in stability pools. And obviously, because it's a stable coin, there's less volatility. Anyhow, the point that I'm trying to make is really we have an audience that we need to reach. And I think the way that we can reach that audience is more in the TradFi sense, dealing with some of those hedge fund managers and private equity guys. So we'll be doing our bit as best we can in that space. The other thing that I just wanted to point out is that we obviously, for the chain to continue to grow, we need to see more utility, right? So more projects developing, more things being developed on PulseChain, and we're seeing a lot of that. And I think there's been a hell of a lot of meme coins, and there's a bit of an explosion happening in that space. And whilst it's not an area that I particularly have an interest in, there's been a lot of solid returns achieved in that space. And look, it would be remiss of me and representing liquid loans not to say that we know that a lot of people are hurting in terms of the price of Pulse and certainly the price of the loan token. We know that has had a negative impact. We also hope that starts to change over time. It may take longer than expected, but we do anticipate a return to the community that supported us and supported PulseChain. But again, we're very well aware and acutely aware of the fact that people are hurting. And so, it's no surprise to us to see the meme coin sort of explosion happening. And the only thing I'm really waiting on is I want to see Somi's cooking shows. That's the one that I'm keen to see. I've seen him I've seen him tweet something out recently where he was cooking, and I thought, okay, Somi's cooking show, that rings a bell for me. So it'd be fun to see Somi do something along those lines. But again, the one thing I do like about Somi is he's bringing attention to the chain, right? So he's doing what he needs to do, and he does it in his style and his manner. And yeah, personally, I kind of find it amusing and amusing, but also informative. So on that basis, it's good to watch Somi and get some input from him. And look, some of the things I don't always agree with, but there's a hell of a lot of stuff that's quite factual, and he presents it in a very unique way. So for me, Somi gets a tick of approval. I really like Somi, and the way he deploys and develops some of that content is really quite interesting for me. But again, I guess for me, and for representing the team more broadly, this is all about growing adoption, right? So we want more people coming to PulseChain. Now, on that aim, and I'm really excited about this, and I think Matty Allen may have alluded to this. Actually, I know he did because he presented some content around this. We are developing GoPulseChain.com, okay? It will be a landing site for everything related to PulseChain. We'll do it in our style. We're doing our best to represent the community at large. We will work with all the teams that are developing to enable them to promote what they're doing on that particular site. It will be in our style, as in we don't do things in half measures. If anyone using our protocol will be aware, we do everything as best we can, and provide a lot of content to support what we're doing. But I think this is something that's it's almost like having a business card for PulseChain. So what we want to make sure of is that we represent the chain effectively and represent all the teams as best we can. And we'll be engaging with teams just to make sure that whatever we're providing as content is reflects what they're wanting to position for their own respective products. But at the same time, it just means that, you know, people that may not know anything about PulseChain, when they come to a site like this, they think, oh my goodness, look at all the projects, look what they're building. This is fantastic. There's so much content. That's what we need. We need a calling card for PulseChain, and we're building it, right? So that's coming. We're close now. Obviously, it's something that will continue to evolve over time, but we're very, very close. And I know Scottish Dave and the marketing team are doing everything they can to make that happen. And for me at least, I'm really excited about that. And hopefully the community can rally behind it. And on that note, guys, I know I've been rambling a little bit now. Really appreciate your support. I know people are hurting. We're going to continue to do what we need to do. Whilst you may be aware of some of the things that we're developing, there'll be more announcements to come. But please don't lose sight of the fact that we are in a bear market. Sure, things are returning, that other projects are doing well. We're kind of hopeful that, you know, things progress well for Richard, but we'll do our bit to make sure that we continue to promote PulseChain and do what we can for the community at large. So guys, thanks very much for your time.